Example number 3. X equals to Moein, Hina, Rida, Isha. Y equals to Air University, Python, Machine Learning and Deep Learning. Initially I said A equals to 0, B equals to 0, and then to use the for loop, for number in X, for number in Y, take the point of X of A, comma, Y of B, and then B plus equals to 1, A plus equals to 1, B equals to 0. When you run it, you will get this output. This will be the output here. Look, when you compare this example with the previous one, which was example number 2, it is exactly the same thing, but the only difference here is the string. Last time we were doing for the numbers, but this time we are doing for the strings. If you look to the variable, X is a variable name, Y is a variable name. We have two variables. X represents this whole list, which is the collection of the strings. These are names. These are the names of the classmates. Moein, Hina, Rida, Isha are the classmates, which are actually strings because they have been enclosed inside the quotes. It is the collection of the strings. This whole information from here up to here is represented by the X, which is the variable name. Similarly, when it comes to the second variable, it is Y. It represents this whole list from here up to here, which is also the collection of the strings. Air University is a string, Python is a string, Machine Learning is a string, and Deep Learning is a string. Now initially A equals to 0, B equals to 0. What are AB? Look, AB represent the individual items of X and Y. A represents the individual item, the individual string of X. A represents Moein, A represents Hina, A represents Rida, A represents Isha. Similarly, B represents the individual item of Y. B represents Air University, B represents Python, B represents Machine Learning and also the Deep Learning. Initially we set them equals to 0, and then we use the for loop. For number in X, for number in X, we put X instead of this whole thing, this whole list. I'm gonna just call X, because remember this whole information has been saved with the name X in the computer memory. So whenever you want to access this information, you have to call X. You don't need to put all this list here. You simply put X instead of this list. Similarly, the other loop, which is for number in Y, it is the second loop for the Y. So we called Y instead of putting this whole list here. You simply call Y, because all this stuff, all this list has been saved with the name Y in the computer memory. So whenever you want to access this whole stuff, you need to call Y here, not this whole list. And then take the point of X of A, comma, Y of B. As I told you, that A represents the individual item of X, which are the names, and B represents the individual items of Y. It makes a set. And then to add the formula for the forward counter loop, which is B plus equals to 1. You can also write B equals to B plus 1. Similarly, the forward counter loop formula for the A, which is for the outer loop, A plus equals to 1, and then B equals to 0. Look, it is a nested loop. Look, we put one loop inside another. That's why we call it nested loop. When you look to the outer loop for number in X, you simply put colons and then press the enter button. Your new line will start from here, and then put another loop. So this inner loop comes under the outer loop. This loop depends on the outer loop. If the outer loop executes, the inner loop will execute. Otherwise, the inner loop will not execute. And then the print function, print of X of A, comma, Y of B. So they are interlinked. If we put one loop inside another loop, so this region is nested loop. And then we add the forward counter formula here. B plus equals to 1. It is for the inner loop. A plus equals to 1 is for the outer loop. Now when you run it, you will get this output. Look, the outer for loop works for the X. The inner for loop works for the Y. So first, the outer loop will iterate. The outer for loop will start iteration. So first it iterates over the very first item of the X, which is Moein. So you will see Moein here. And then the inner loop will start iteration. So the inner loop will iterate over each and every single item of Y. You will see Air University. And then it will start iteration. And the second item, which is Python, you will see Python here. iteration on the third item, which is machine learning. You will see machine learning here. And then the inner loop iterates on the other item, which is the deep learning. So you will see the deep learning here. So the time when the inner loop finish iteration, then the outer loop will iterate again. Look at here at the very first stage. You will see Moein all the way for all the four items, of the inner loop. The inner loop will not stop. It will iterate over all the items. The moment when it finished the iteration for all the items, then only the outer loop will execute again. So since here the inner loop finished iteration of the last item, which is deep learning, therefore now again the outer loop will start iteration. It will activate. So now the outer for loop start iteration of the second item, which is Hina. So you will see Hina here, and then the inner loop will start iteration. So first it start iteration of the very first item of y, which is Air University. You will see Air University, and then it iterates of the second item, which is Python. You will see Python, and then it iterates of the third item, which is machine learning. So you will see machine learning, and then it iterates of the last item, which is deep learning. So you will see the deep learning. So as the inner loop finishes the iteration, again the outer loop will start iteration. Look at here. Hina is all the way for all the four items. It is the second iteration of the outer loop. But as the inner loop finishes iteration of the last item, which is deep learning, then the outer loop will start iteration again. Now the outer loop will start iteration of the third item, which is Rida. So you will see Rida here. And then the inner loop. The inner loop again start iteration of the first item, which is Air University. So you will see Air University. And then it iterates of the second item, which is Python. So you will see Python. And then it iterates of the third item, which is machine learning. So you will see machine learning. And then it iterates of the last item, which is deep learning. So you will see deep learning here. Look at here. You will see Rida all the way for all the four items of y. This is the third iteration of the outer loop. As the inner loop finishes the iteration of the last item, then the outer for loop will iterate again. Now the for loop will start iteration again of the fourth item, which is Isha. So you will see Isha here. And then the inner loop. Inner loop again start iteration of the first item, which is Air University. You will see Air University. And then it iterates of the second item, which is Python. So you will see Python here. And then it iterates of the third item, which is machine learning. So you will see machine learning here. And then it iterates of the fourth item, which is deep learning. So you will see deep learning. Look, you will see Isha all the way for all the four items, of y. That's how the nested loop works here. You will see such patterns in the output. This left side is the iteration of the outer loop for the x. This right side is the iteration of the inner loop for the y. Now when you look to the right side, the outer loop iterates only once, but the inner loop iterates for all the four items. As it finishes the iteration for the last item, only then the for loop will start iteration again. So here the for loop iterates for the second item, which is Hina, only once, while the inner for loop will start iteration over all the four items of y. As it finishes iteration for the last item, which is deep learning, only then the outer loop will start again iteration of the third item, which is Rida, and then the inner loop for all the four items. As the inner loop finishes iteration for the last item, which is deep learning, again the for loop will iterate for the fourth item, which is Isha, and then the inner loop for all the four items up to the last item, deep learning. So I hope you got the idea now. It is very simple, but make sure you have to put the formula b plus equals to 1 below the print function and a plus equals to 1 below the for loop. Only then you will see this pattern.